Forget the fairy tales. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't just a parade of tuxedos, champagne, and happy endings. The greatest stars on the silver screen were masters of illusion, hiding double lives, forbidden loves, and scandalous secrets behind those dazzling smiles. What if the truth about your favorite icons is stranger than anything they acted out for the cameras? Ever wonder what shadows lurked behind the spotlights? Brace yourself. Some of these stories are wilder than fiction. Cary Grant. Cary Grant, suave, sophisticated, and the man every guy wanted to be. But the real story of Archibald Leach, the name he left behind, is a psychological thriller worthy of Hitchcock. Born in Bristol, England, Grant's early life was marked by poverty, a mother sent to an asylum, and a burning desire to reinvent himself. MGM didn't just buy his acting chops. They bought his entire identity. Grant worked tirelessly to perfect the American accent, the elegant walk, the wry smile. But beneath the polish, he was always chasing something he never quite caught. Rumors about Grant's sexuality swirled for decades, fueled by his close relationship with fellow actor Randolph Scott. Studio bosses went to great lengths to pair him with starlets, arrange marriages, and squash gossip. Grant himself never confirmed or denied the whispers. He just kept the world guessing, always playing a part, even off-screen. There's another twist. Long before psychedelics were hip, Grant underwent LSD therapy, seeking relief from depression and a haunted past. In private, he was philosophical, restless, searching for meaning in a town built on make-believe. Friends described him as kind, complicated, and prone to vanish for weeks at a time when fame felt suffocating. He wrote endless letters, often revealing more in a few lines than any red carpet confession. Cary Grant's secret wasn't one scandal or a single hidden love. It was a lifetime of reinventing himself to survive. He was the ultimate Hollywood illusion, always in control on screen, always searching for himself in real life. The man in the mirror was never quite the man in the movies. Clark Gable. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, was rugged, magnetic, and seemingly untouchable. But no actor wore a heavier mask. Born into poverty, Gable hustled his way up from small-town obscurity, crafting a tough guy persona that masked deep insecurities. On screen, he was a heartthrob. Off-screen, he was haunted by the fear that someone would expose him as an imposter. Gable's love life was tabloid gold, multiple marriages, endless affairs, and a trail of broken hearts. But his most guarded secret was a daughter born out of wedlock to actress Loretta Young. Studio fixers covered up pregnancy, shipping Young off to hide the birth and spinning a story that fooled the public for decades. Gable never publicly acknowledged his child, even as rumors swirled, an open secret in Hollywood's gossip corridors. Beneath his swagger, Gable fought crippling stage fright and a lifelong battle with alcoholism. He kept a flask on set and nursed private anxieties about his looks, education, and social class. His boisterous confidence was armor, protecting a man who felt, in his own words, like a farm boy in borrowed clothes. As his fame soared, so did the pressure. Gable worked grueling hours, hiding exhaustion behind his trademark grin. Friends described him as loyal, generous, but painfully private, preferring the solitude of hunting trips to the chaos of Hollywood parties. After the tragic death of his wife, Carole Lombard, Gable's world darkened. He enlisted in World War II, risking his life as an airman, maybe searching for redemption, maybe trying to outrun his ghosts. Clark Gable played a king, but behind the scenes, he was just another man navigating the landmines of fame, always on guard, always afraid his secrets would come crashing down. James Stewart. James Stewart always seemed like the guy you'd trust with your house keys, a straight-shooting, humble hero with a stammer and a smile. On screen, he was Hollywood's everyman, earnest, vulnerable, utterly relatable. But behind the boy-next-door image, Stewart carried a burden few ever suspected, a secret life forged not in the backlots, but in the chaos of World War II. Stewart was the first major American actor to enlist after Pearl Harbor, and he didn't just pose for propaganda photos. He flew over 20 dangerous combat missions as a bomber pilot in Europe, rising to the rank of brigadier general. He returned home a decorated war hero, but those medals came with scars invisible to the public. Stewart's family and friends noticed the change instantly. He was quieter, more introspective, quick to anger, and plagued by sleepless nights. Today, we'd call it PTSD. In the 1940s, he suffered in silence. Back in Hollywood, Stewart channeled his turmoil into his greatest roles. His performances in It's a Wonderful Life and Vertigo are laced with an intensity and darkness drawn straight from his own haunted mind. Studio PR, meanwhile, painted him as eternally wholesome, glossing over his struggles with depression and the existential weight of everything he'd seen. Stewart kept his pain tightly locked away, rarely speaking of the war, even as nightmares followed him for decades. His secret was that the American dream he embodied had been forever altered by war. The innocence was gone, replaced by a gravitas he could never shake. Stewart's greatest acting trick wasn't playing the hero. It was convincing the world he was okay when the cameras stopped rolling. In the end, James Stewart's secret life was one of quiet suffering, a testament to the hidden costs of heroism and the reality that even Hollywood's most trustworthy face could be hiding darkness just beneath the surface. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was the kind of actor who made everything look effortless, gruff, soulful, and commanding. On set, he could steal a scene with a look. But off-screen, Tracy's life was a masterclass in compartmentalization, balancing a web of secrets that would have sent lesser men crashing down. Raised in a devout Catholic family, Tracy carried the weight of his faith everywhere, except when it came to Hollywood temptations. He was fiercely loyal to his wife, Louise, at least in public. Privately, he spent decades in a passionate, turbulent relationship with Katharine Hepburn. The affair was Hollywood's worst-kept secret, but both actors played their parts, Tracy refusing to divorce for religious reasons, Hepburn publicly just a friend. The arrangement was as much about survival as romance, and Tracy's Catholic guilt haunted him until the end. But forbidden love wasn't his only hidden struggle. Tracy battled crippling alcoholism, often disappearing for days on benders, then returning to deliver powerhouse performances as if nothing had happened. Directors and co-stars learned to work around his moods, and studios kept his addictions out of the papers. After all, a scandal could ruin box office returns. Tracy's son, John, was born deaf, a fact the actor kept private for years, racked with guilt that he'd somehow caused his child's condition. The weight of family secrets added to the pressure. Despite these storms, Tracy's performances burned with authenticity, his anguish, guilt, and longing bleeding onto the screen in ways audiences felt, even if they didn't understand why. He was a man at war with himself, forever trying to reconcile his public image with a private world in turmoil. Spencer Tracy's secret life was a mess of contradictions. A moral compass in a town with no North Star, a loving husband in name but not in deed, a tortured soul who found fleeting peace only in the world of make-believe. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart, bogey to fans, was the ultimate tough guy, the chain-smoking cynic who made trench coats and whiskey look like battle armor. He's remembered as the voice of noir, forever cool under pressure, the kind of man who'd rather fight than flinch. But step past the headlines and smoky close-ups, and you'll find a secret life steeped in contradictions and vulnerability. Bogart was a born contrarian. While Hollywood painted him as a brawler, he was actually a sensitive intellectual who loved books, wordplay, and especially chess. His obsession with the game was legendary. He'd play for hours between takes, challenge strangers in seedy New York clubs, and sometimes hustle fellow actors for money on set. The Maltese Falcon may have been his calling card, but chess was his escape, the one place where rules made sense, and the chaos of stardom couldn't touch him. His upbringing was equally complicated. The son of a cold, ambitious mother and a disappointed, distant father, Bogart grew up craving attention and never feeling quite good enough. This emotional hunger drove both his on-screen magnetism and his private restlessness. In relationships, he was tempestuous, with 3 failed marriages, endless affairs, and a devotion to Lauren Bacall that finally brought him a measure of stability late in life. Despite his persona, Bogart avoided Hollywood's social scene, preferring quiet nights at home, witty banter with Bacall, and strategic moves on the chessboard. He was quick to help friends in trouble, famously forming the Rat Pack as a kind of surrogate family for Hollywood's misfits and rebels. Bogart's greatest secret wasn't a scandal, it was his softness. The king of cool was, deep down, a romantic idealist, a man who found refuge in intellect and wit while playing the world-weary cynic. His legend endures not just because he was tough, but because he hid his cracks behind that signature half-smile and made us believe that even the hardest hearts can be haunted. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn didn't just play swashbucklers. He lived like one, on and off the screen. To the public, he was the dashing hero of Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, swinging from chandeliers and stealing kisses with reckless abandon. But behind the studio gloss, Flynn's secret life was a hurricane of hedonism, scandal, and intrigue. Born in Tasmania, Flynn arrived in Hollywood with a taste for danger already baked in. His off-screen antics became the stuff of legend: wild parties, dangerous stunts, and affairs that seemed to multiply with every tabloid headline. Studios covered up everything from drunken brawls to high-profile affairs, terrified that even a whiff of scandal could jeopardize their leading man. But Flynn didn't care. He seemed determined to burn the candle at both ends, and then set the wax on fire for good measure. The real shockers, though, came behind closed doors. Flynn's name was whispered in connection to espionage plots during World War II. The FBI even opened a file on him, and he faced 2 highly publicized statutory rape trials, charges he beat. But that left his reputation forever tinged with notoriety. His catchphrase, "In like Flynn," became both a badge of honor and a warning label. Flynn's health and fortune declined as his appetites caught up with him. Alcohol, drugs, and reckless living aged him far beyond his years. But through it all, he kept up a rakish charm, never apologizing for who he was. Friends remembered him as generous, unpredictable, and a magnet for chaos. The truth? Errol Flynn's secret life was no secret at all to those who knew him. But the full extent of his adventures, loves, and disasters was always a step ahead of the tabloids. He lived like a man who knew the ending was coming, so he'd better make the story unforgettable. In Hollywood's golden age, he was both the legend and the cautionary tale. William Holden. William Holden, handsome, rugged, and endlessly charming, looked like a man who had it all. His performances in Sunset Boulevard and Stay Like 17 made him a Hollywood titan, the kind of star producers loved and audiences couldn't forget. But beneath that confident exterior, Holden's real story was one of deep internal struggle, secret addictions, and a darkness that refused to stay hidden behind the spotlight. Holden's professional life was a whirlwind of accolades and box office hits, but he battled severe alcoholism for decades. Studios tried to keep it quiet, fearing their leading man's image would tarnish, but the cracks showed. On set, he was known for being both wildly charismatic and, on bad days, impossible to work with. Some directors whispered about having to schedule his scenes around his drinking. Others quietly replaced him when his struggles became unmanageable. But the secrets ran even deeper. Holden was plagued by depression and an ongoing fear that he was a fraud, a feeling only worsened by Hollywood's constant need for reinvention. He often escaped to Africa, drawn to big game hunting and wildlife conservation, an obsession that was as much about finding peace as it was about adventure. Out there, away from cameras and contracts, He could try to shake the anxieties that fame never cured. Holden's relationships were famously volatile. His marriage to Brenda Marshall fraught with infidelity and loneliness. He sought solace in affairs, most notably with Audrey Hepburn and Grace Kelly, yet always seemed adrift. Haunted by demons he refused to name out loud. Ultimately, his battles caught up to him. Holden died alone, the victim of a tragic accident after a night of heavy drinking. For all his success, William Holden was a man divided, a golden boy on screen, a troubled soul in private. His life is a cautionary tale about how Hollywood's brightest lights can cast the longest shadows, and how sometimes the toughest battles are fought far from the public eye. Marlon Brando. No one ever accused Marlon Brando of being ordinary. The Godfather legend and method acting icon stormed into Hollywood with raw talent and a disdain for authority that rattled the industry to its core. Audiences saw a smoldering rebel. The real Brando was even more complex, riddled with secrets, contradictions, and a stormy personal life that would make any tabloid editor's head spin. Brando's off-screen world was a whirlwind of rebellion and chaos. He had countless affairs with both women and men, a fact he never advertised, but also never denied when rumors swirled. Like a large number of men, I too have had homosexual experiences, and am not ashamed, he once admitted, shocking even his closest friends. His love life was a labyrinth, from torrid flings with famous actresses to deep, tumultuous relationships with lesser-known partners, all kept carefully hidden from the mainstream press. But Brando's real battle was with himself. He oscillated between intense self-loathing and ego, refusing to play by Hollywood's rules. He turned down roles, fought with directors, gained and lost weight dramatically, and sometimes sabotaged his own career just to prove he could. He championed social justice causes, marched for civil rights, and famously rejected his Oscar in protest of Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans, drawing ire and admiration in equal measure. Behind closed doors, Brando grappled with deep-seated trauma from his abusive childhood. Family tragedy followed him. The deaths of his son Christian and daughter Cheyenne became headlines, and Brando never recovered from the guilt and heartbreak. He retreated into eccentric isolation, filling his house with animals and rarely letting outsiders in. Marlon Brando's secret life was one of brilliance and torment, lived at full volume, but never fully revealed. His legacy is as much about the roles he played as the boundaries he shattered, proving that sometimes the most complicated characters are the ones you never see on screen. Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper's face was synonymous with the American ideal: steady, reliable, the cowboy you could trust to ride into town and clean up the mess. On screen, he was virtue incarnate. Off-screen, though, Cooper's life was a patchwork of carefully concealed secrets, unspoken anxieties, and quiet rebellion. Born Frank James Cooper in Montana, he grew up on the edge of the frontier, a real outdoorsman, with a love for the simple life. But fame forced him into a role he never quite embraced: the silent, stoic hero. Cooper's shy, awkward nature made him uncomfortable at Hollywood parties, so he built his private life behind a wall of discretion. What few knew was that Cooper struggled with severe health anxiety, convinced for years that every ache or cough was a sign of looming doom. The studios, eager to maintain his clean-cut image, covered up Cooper's string of affairs, including high-profile romances with Clara Bow, Patricia Neal, and a series of relationships with men that were carefully erased from the gossip columns. Hollywood insiders whispered, but the public never saw the internal conflict that drove Cooper to hide significant parts of himself. He worried constantly about scandals and how it might affect his career, growing increasingly anxious as he aged. Cooper's political views also defied expectations. While he played all American heroes, he was quietly critical of McCarthyism and wary of Hollywood's herd mentality. He retreated to his ranch as often as possible, searching for the peace that fame rarely brought. When the illness finally struck, cancer, the very specter he had always feared. Cooper faced it with the same understated courage he brought to the screen. Gary Cooper's secret life is a reminder that even the straightest shooters in Hollywood are navigating their own hidden battles. His story was one of quiet resistance, a man determined to be true to himself, even if the world only ever saw the mask. John Wayne. John Wayne, the ultimate symbol of American masculinity, a walking embodiment of grit, swagger, and cowboy justice. The Duke became an icon because he made toughness look effortless, a living legend in spurs. But if you think Wayne's bravado was the whole story, think again. His secret life was woven with vulnerabilities, contradictions, and hidden insecurities that few ever glimpsed. Born Marion Morrison, Wayne's rise was shaped by Hollywood's relentless demand for myth-making. He worked his way up from prop boy to bit player to top-billed superstar, but privately, he never fully escaped the fear of being seen as an imposter. Wayne was intensely self-conscious about his looks and voice. His deep drawl, which later became his trademark, started as an attempt to mask a childhood stutter and insecurity. What's more, Wayne feared being perceived as weak. He went to great lengths to maintain his tough image, performing dangerous stunts even as he aged, hiding pain from old injuries, and refusing to show emotion in public. Privately, he was plagued by loneliness and anxiety, seeking comfort in conservative politics and close-knit circles of trusted friends. Despite his persona, he could be deeply sentimental, writing heartfelt letters and worrying constantly about his children's futures. Then there was the politics. Wayne's fierce patriotism sometimes bordered on paranoia. He was a staunch anti-communist, worked with the House Un-American Activities Committee, and worried obsessively about America's image abroad. Yet, off-camera, he was known for surprising kindness and quiet generosity, helping struggling actors without seeking publicity. Behind the bluster, Wayne's greatest secret was just how hard he worked to maintain the Duke facade. His legacy is built not just on the roles he played, but on the fears and doubts he hid from the world. A man who fought to be strong, even when he felt anything but. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift was Hollywood's original tortured heartthrob, a man whose talent and beauty were matched only by his inner turmoil. On screen, he brought a raw, vulnerable intensity that made audiences swoon. Off-screen, Clift was fighting a battle he could never let the world see, living in constant fear that his true self would destroy his career. Clift's homosexuality was Hollywood's worst-kept secret and his greatest vulnerability. At a time when being openly gay meant instant exile, Clift hid his relationships behind staged romances with actresses and a relentless focus on work. The stress was crushing. He drank to cope, popping pills to get through sleepless nights, haunted by the knowledge that exposure meant professional ruin. Friends and lovers described him as loving, but tormented, desperate to connect, yet terrified of being found out. His personal struggles collided with tragedy after a devastating car crash in 1956 left his face disfigured and his psyche even more fragile. Studios worried he'd lost his matinee idol appeal. Clift fought back, delivering powerful performances in Judgment at Nuremberg and The Misfits, channeling his pain into unforgettable artistry. Still, the pressures mounted. He became increasingly isolated, his health failing, his addiction deepening. Clift's story is one of immense courage and crippling fear. A man at war with himself, forced to hide his love and identity behind a mask of cool detachment. Hollywood celebrated his talent, but offered little support, exploiting his beauty while ignoring his suffering. When he died at just 45, it was officially called a heart attack, but everyone who knew him understood the heartbreak ran much deeper. Montgomery Clift's secret life was one of quiet agony and defiant artistry. He may have been Hollywood's most beautiful leading man, but he was also its most wounded, his legacy defined by the truths he was never allowed to speak. Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson's name was synonymous with masculine perfection. Tall, handsome, and charming, He defined the Hollywood leading man for a generation. But while audiences swooned over his on-screen romances, Hudson was living a double life, one that the studios worked tirelessly to keep under wraps. Hudson was gay at a time when being out in Hollywood was professional suicide. Universal Studios orchestrated his every move, from arranging fake dates with starlets to organizing a marriage of convenience that would throw gossip columnists off the scent. Publicly, he played the role of eligible bachelor and womanizer. Privately, he formed close, loving relationships with men, forced to conduct them in the shadows. Friends described the elaborate ruses required to maintain his image: secret getaways, coded phone calls, even false addresses. The pressure of leading this double life was immense. Hudson confided in only a handful of trusted friends, and the fear of exposure followed him everywhere. Yet he managed to build a career that spanned decades, with box office hits and critically acclaimed performances. Despite the studio's control, Hudson found ways to support gay causes and offer quiet support to others in the industry who faced the same struggles. His secret was finally and tragically revealed in the 1980s, when he became one of the first major celebrities to die from AIDS. Hudson's courage in facing his illness forced Hollywood and the world to confront the stigma around both AIDS and homosexuality. His final years were marked by a determination to live honestly, even as his health failed. Rock Hudson's secret life was more than just a story of survival. It was a quiet act of rebellion against an industry determined to write his narrative. He remains an icon, not just for the roles he played, but for the courage he showed when it mattered most. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire is forever remembered as the man who made dancing look effortless, floating across the screen with grace and wit in every tap. But behind those dazzling routines was a man driven by relentless perfectionism and a secretive, fiercely guarded private life that few ever truly understood. Astaire's public persona was all charm and lightness, yet he was a deeply private, even reclusive man off camera. He spent countless hours drilling routines, often rehearsing until his feet bled, demanding absolute precision from himself and his partners. Co-stars like Ginger Rogers and Sid Charisse spoke about his demanding standards and obsessive attention to detail. Astaire would not rest until a number was flawless, sometimes doing dozens of takes for a single scene. While audiences saw joy, his process was agony. Every smile, every flourish painstakingly constructed. What most fans never saw was Astaire's shrewdness as a businessman. He fiercely protected his interests, negotiating his contracts with steely resolve and making investments that kept him comfortable long after the dance music stopped. Astaire avoided the excesses of Hollywood, steering clear of wild parties and scandal, instead dedicating his downtime to golf, horse racing, and family. Even as one of the industry's most beloved stars, Astaire struggled with insecurity, always fearing that each project might be his last. The death of his beloved first wife, Phyllis, devastated him, plunging him into a period of deep depression that he concealed from the public. His return to work was as much therapy as a career move. Dancing became both a shield and a lifeline. Fred Astaire's secret life was one of quiet control, always keeping the world at arm's length, determined to be remembered for the artistry, not the chaos behind the curtain. His greatest performance, perhaps, was never letting anyone see how hard he was working to make it look easy. Burt Lancaster. Burt Lancaster burst onto the Hollywood scene like a force of nature, tall, athletic, and blazing with a charismatic energy that leapt off the screen in films like From Here to Eternity. But the tough guy roles and all-American persona were only part of Lancaster's story. Beneath that muscular surface was a man of secret passions, radical politics, and a private life the studios worked hard to keep in the shadows. Lancaster's Hollywood image was carefully curated, but he quietly lived a life that defied the era's expectations. Insiders whispered about his bisexuality, Affairs with both men and women that never made the gossip columns, thanks to loyal friends and a studio system eager to protect their investment. Lancaster was intensely private, rarely giving interviews, and almost never attending the glitzy Hollywood parties that defined the social scene. He preferred intellectual circles, often inviting artists, writers, and activists to his home for spirited debates. His real rebellion, however, was political. Lancaster was an outspoken critic of the blacklist, supported civil rights long before it was fashionable, and funded progressive causes that put him on FBI watch lists. He risked his career and, at times, his freedom to stand up for what he believed in, lending his name and fortune to those who had been silenced or shunned. Still, the tension between public expectation and private reality wore on Lancaster. He felt alienated from the Hollywood mainstream, forging a career on his own terms, but at the cost of deep loneliness. Later in life, Lancaster spoke about his regrets, especially the relationships and causes he had to hide to keep working in an unforgiving industry. Burt Lancaster's secret life was one of quiet bravery, a reminder that some of Hollywood's greatest icons changed the world not just with their talent, but with the risks they took far from the spotlight. Paul Muni. Paul Muni was called the Man of 1,000 Faces, a master of transformation whose performances in Scarface, The Story of Louis Pasteur, and I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang set the gold standard for Hollywood acting. But while audiences were mesmerized by his skill, Muni himself was almost a ghost in the world he dominated, a man plagued by deep anxieties, social withdrawal, and a lifelong aversion to fame. Muni's devotion to craft was legendary. He'd disappear into his roles for months, living as his characters, sometimes even adopting their habits and mannerisms off-set. But this immersion came at a steep price. Muni suffered from crippling stage fright and performance anxiety, to the point where he would physically tremble before a take or curtain rise. His wife, Bella, acted as his protector, screening phone calls, managing his interactions, and shielding him from the draining demands of Hollywood social life. In public, Muni was famously aloof, rarely granting interviews or attending premieres. He shunned industry parties and publicity stunts, preferring to retreat into books, long walks, and the comfort of his home. Studio heads found him maddening, a superstar who refused to play by the rules, showing up only to work and vanishing as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. Muni's fear of failure drove his perfectionism, but also robbed him of joy. He struggled with chronic self-doubt, never believing his work was good enough, despite a mantle full of awards. Friends described him as gentle, but distant, always slightly apart, as if he'd never really accepted Hollywood as his home. Paul Muni's secret life was a paradox, a man celebrated for inhabiting other people's skins, yet never truly comfortable in his own. His legacy endures as both a masterclass in acting and a haunting reminder that even the most brilliant talents can be prisoners of their own minds. Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor's chiseled jaw and stoic charm made him MGM's golden boy, starring in everything from Waterloo Bridge to Quo Vadis. He was sold as the all-American hero, dependable, brave, and morally upright. But Taylor's real story was one of secret resentments, political entanglements, and a lifelong struggle with the prison of studio control. Taylor didn't choose Hollywood. Hollywood chose him. Plucked from college and remade into a star, he spent his early years chafing against the suffocating restrictions of MGM's iron grip. Studio chiefs dictated his every move, what he wore, who he dated, even what opinions he was allowed to voice in public. Privately, Taylor resented being little more than a handsome product, his longing for creative freedom clashing with his reputation as a studio yes-man. The darkest turn in Taylor's secret life came during the McCarthy era. Pressured by MGM and the House Un-American Activities Committee, Taylor named names, testifying against suspected communists and contributing to Hollywood's notorious blacklist. The decision haunted him for the rest of his life. Friends recalled his deep regret, his discomfort with the political witch hunt, and his private admissions that he'd felt bullied and manipulated by studio lawyers and Washington power brokers. Despite the burden, Taylor continued playing the good soldier, reliable, cooperative, always camera-ready. Yet the price was heavy. He battled depression and isolation, confiding to friends that the man audiences saw on screen was a character built to survive Hollywood, not the person he truly was. Robert Taylor's secret life is a case study in the costs of complicity and the private pain of public perfection. Beneath the studio polish was a man who, for all his fame, never truly felt free. Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier is revered as one of history's greatest actors, a Shakespearean genius who conquered stage and screen on both sides of the Atlantic. His performances were electrifying, his legacy unmatched. Yet Olivier's secret life was a tempest of ambition, insecurity, and emotional chaos, all carefully hidden behind his classical veneer. Olivier's drive for perfection bordered on obsession. Friends and colleagues spoke of his relentless self-criticism. He'd often spiral into anxiety after performances, convinced he'd failed to meet his own impossible standards. He was prone to mood swings and bouts of melancholy, struggling with what would today be recognized as severe depression. Olivier's personal life was just as complex. His legendary marriage to Vivien Leigh was a public romance and a private story. Leigh's mental health struggles took a massive toll on both of them, and Olivier, while supportive in public, often retreated into work or extramarital affairs to escape the pressure. Even as he courted applause, he wrestled with guilt and the fear that his private failings would overshadow his artistry. Sexuality was another secret facet of Olivier's life. Though he was married multiple times, close friends and biographers have suggested that his relationships with both men and women were more nuanced than the public ever knew, a reality impossible to share in the era's unforgiving climate. Despite the accolades, Olivier was haunted by feelings of inadequacy, forever measuring himself against ghosts, his father's expectations, his own towering reputation, and the judgment of critics. His greatest achievement wasn't just mastering Hamlet or Othello. It was surviving the psychological battleground of being Olivier, year after year. Laurence Olivier's secret life was a mosaic of brilliance and torment, ambition and vulnerability, a reminder that even the gods of the stage fight private wars no curtain call can erase. Hollywood's golden age was built on fantasy, but, as you've seen tonight, its greatest stars were far more complicated than any script they followed. Behind every red carpet was a web of secrets, passion, pain, rebellion, and regrets that never made the headlines. Which actor's secret life shocked you most? Hit the comments, share your theories, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into old Hollywood's hidden stories. Because in the end, no one lives happily ever after when the lights go down.